and good for America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognize Sergeant First Class Jason Manila, who recently won the Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year award last week during the Army's Best Warrior competition. Jason is from my district in Fremont, California, and recently moved within my district to Hayward, California. The Army's Best Warrior competition is a 3-day event that tests a soldier's physical and mental toughness. Sergeant Manila is the first ever reservist to win this prestigious Army-wide title. Sergeant Manila is a member of the Reserve's 445th Civil Affairs Battalion based in Mountain View. And while serving in Afghanistan in 2012, Sergeant Manila had his convoy attacked. And while it was attacked, it left him with a traumatic brain injury. Sergeant Manila's story is one of hope and the power of resilience. As part of Sergeant Manila's recovery, he focused on training for the Army's Best Warrior competition. Back in August of this year, I had the opportunity to visit Afghanistan. I was able to meet with soldiers, men and women serving from California's 15th Congressional District. Over in Afghanistan, I saw firsthand what our men and women in the armed services endure each day to make sure that we rid Afghanistan as a breeding ground for terrorism, and make sure that never again the United States is attacked from enemies created abroad. I'm very thankful for the service of people like Sergeant Manila and those I met with while I was in Afghanistan, and I know that Operation Enduring Freedom has led to thousands of Americans being wounded who served over in Afghanistan and are healing today back home on their own path to recovery. Sergeant Manila's story is truly one that is uplifting for every soldier, man and woman, who is recovering. Congratulations again to Sergeant Manila. Your strength, your determination, and your character is an inspiration to thousands of other wounded men and women of our armed services. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the House Judiciary Committee yesterday raised the overarching question of our generation. Will the American Constitution stand? All the laws passed under that Constitution have elaborate enforcement mechanisms backed by armed force, but the Constitution itself has no such enforcement mechanism. It was designed to be internally self-enforcing, with the powers of government clearly divided among 3 separate and equal branches of government. But this self-enforcement mechanism can only work when the powers are evenly divided, when those who exercise those powers are devoted to the Constitution, and when the American people insist on it. That is the great question for our generation, and for which we are deeply answerable. Are we allowing the Constitution to disintegrate before our eyes? The Constitution makes very clear that only Congress may make laws, and that the principal responsibility of the executive is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Yet the executive branch's increasingly asserted sweeping powers to unilaterally nullify laws that it dislikes, to pick and choose who must obey the law and who need not, and even to impose entirely new laws that Congress has explicitly refused to enact. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, said that its single most important feature was giving the legislative and not the executive branch the decision over war or peace. Yet the executive now asserts the authority to attack other nations without congressional authorization. The Bill of Rights protects every American from retribution for expressing their political beliefs. It protects a free press from intimidation. It protects the free and open expression of religious beliefs. It protects the means of individuals to protect themselves and their freedom. It protects every individual from having their records searched or their property seized without due process of law. And yet these fundamental rights have been made a mockery by the agents of this administration, from the IRS to the Justice Department to the NSA. The rot began long before this administration, but under this administration it has become a crisis. All this is happening, we're told, for the common good. Well, ours wouldn't be the first civilization to succumb to the siren song of a benevolent and all-powerful government. But every society that has fallen for this lie has awakened one morning to discover that the benevolence is gone and that the all-powerful government is still there. Much of the structure of the American Constitution that has preserved our liberty for 225 years, that has contained the unwarranted expansion of governmental power, and that has preserved the natural and individual rights of every citizen, has been allowed to decay. The form is still there, the institutions continue to function, but they no longer serve their principal role to protect the rule of law and the liberty of the people. Here in this Capitol, we're surrounded by the symbols of the Roman Republic. They should be a warning to us. The Roman Senate continued to exist 400 years after the fall of the Republic, but its nature and purpose had become empty. Chairman Goodlatte quoted Gibbon yesterday, who observed that the principles of a free constitution are irrevocably lost when the legislative power is dominated by the executive. That is precisely what is happening. The institutions of our American Republic continue to operate, but the structures within it are rapidly degrading. In this condition, our Constitution is becoming like a rotting porch. We can still discern its form and purpose, but the structure that gave it strength and support is hollowing out through years of abuse and neglect until one day it will simply collapse. The Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday was the first step by Congress to assess the harm already done and to begin reversing that damage before it's too late. But I must warn that in its current divided condition, Congress cannot do so alone. Ultimately, it will require the active assistance of the rightful owners of that Constitution, the American people. How ironic it would be if the liberties of this nation, heroically defended by the sacrifices of 9 generations of Americans on far-off battlefields, might someday be carelessly thrown away here at home. Let that not be said of our generation. Let it be said instead that just when our Constitution seemed most in peril, this generation rose up, insisted on absolute fidelity to the Constitution by those it elected, and then went on to revive, restore, and preserve that Constitution for the many generations of Americans who followed. I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
The House wraps up morning hour, recessing until noon Eastern. On their legislative agenda today, a bill that would exempt most private equity firms from registering with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The White House opposes the bill, saying yesterday the administration is committed to building a safer, more stable financial system. Votes scheduled throughout the afternoon. Live coverage when the House gavels back in at noon Eastern here on C-SPAN. Off the House floor today, the House Commerce Subcommittee on Health holds a hearing on the impact of the